Thanks for joining us for the Secure Connections podcast, brought to you by IoTSSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. As always, I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Content Director for IoTSSA, and joining me today to share their insight on cybersecurity are Harry Perper and Karen Waltermire, cybersecurity engineers at the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, otherwise known as NCCOE. Welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, Karen and Harry.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Great. So the IoTSSA team gets a lot of questions about the work that the government's doing, NIST and other things that you're involved with. And I'm looking forward to learning more about your activities in today's discussion. So let's start out with some background. Can you describe the NCCOE and its mission?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Straightforward, the mission is to accelerate the adoption of secure technologies. And how we break that down is with a small group of federal employees here at NIST, the parent agency at NIST. The center really pulls together thought leaders, academic innovators, vendors, communities of interest of all shapes and sizes to work on the most pressing cybersecurity challenges for businesses. And what we produce is a practice guide documents, and if some of the listeners are familiar with the NIST documents, they're very similar in form.
Very good. So what's the story behind the development of the agency or the center, and who was involved in putting this together?
Yes, excellent question. So NIST has a rich history of standards development going back over 112 years. But more recently, when cybersecurity became a focus of a lot of enterprises and industry and public and private ecosystems, NIST started to delve into the last 40 years of standards development for securing such IT infrastructure. Thank you. I need to pause. Securing IT infrastructures with standards and best practices. So what the center does is takes those well-written, well-exhaustive special publications, if you will, these documents, and we apply them. We apply them to real-world scenarios here in our labs using technology that's available off the shelf, and we provide demonstrations and examples of those standards and best practices with any sector's technologies to produce a guide that would secure or improve the security posture of their operation.
Makes perfect sense. And I know in our community, managed service providers, IT service providers, and those in the cloud, the processes are obviously key, especially when it comes to cybersecurity and data protection. But I think a lot of people, at least over the last couple of years in our community, become more familiar with NIST, or at least as it's parts of its framework and how it works within other standards like CompTIA. CompTIA has channel standards and other things that fit. How can MSPs and IT service providers best leverage the standards with their clients and their own businesses?
Sure. If they're already familiar with a lot of the NIST documents, everything is publicly available and downloadable in a PDF format or what have you. So we have the risk management framework that is kind of the foundation for controls that your listeners are probably used to at a IT system level. But more familiar now, a lot of managed service providers, small and medium-sized businesses are looking for guidance from NIST in the form of the Cybersecurity Framework. And that's where we have levels of security and profiles of different types and shapes for the different types and shapes of an enterprise. So the leveraging of the components and secure technologies is one part of the puzzle that we're trying to solve. Another part is, how do companies know where to find this kind of talent? And NIST does an excellent job of providing something along the lines of a national initiative for cyber education. And it's a guide that says, here's what your talent is going to have to look like in order to do X, Y, or Z technical job. I can say database administrator, someone else can say, Oracle guru. The NIST framework, the National Initiative for Cyber Education, that framework, plus the Cybersecurity Framework, plus some RMF best practices, gives you a really holistic look at how to serve the enterprise well, with the talent, with the technology, with best practices, how to guide standards, what have you. And the byproduct of all that is, if the sector is to remain compliant, that is a really happy ending, where these documents will help remain compliant, and if they're in a regulatory sector.
Yeah, I know a lot of their clients will fall in different compliance issues, but taking a step back to, you mentioned talent. So on the human resources side, if they're looking to build out their team of cybersecurity experts, these documents, there's some guidance in there as far as what types of skills and responsibilities, those type of things. Can you kind of dive into that a little more?
Sure. This has been an initiative for the past, I would say, maybe 5 or so years here at NIST. It became very apparent to the leaders of the world and IT communities and a lot of Fortune 500 companies in this space is that there is a void or even a finite amount of talent in this particular space. I don't know the particular number of IT professionals vacancies throughout different jobs and different enterprises, but it's extraordinary. I do know that. So what the NIST framework, in this particular, the NICE framework, and it's available again, free and publicly available, it does break down what you're looking to solve, how you need to ask for that type of talent, what it would take to train that particular talent. So say if you have in-house staff already and you needed to augment what they do professionally, or that the framework also helps with that. So a lot of small businesses are looking for that framework since they don't have a human resources, or even if they do have a human resources kind of component to their company, they can look to this document, and it's specific to cybersecurity talent, how and what you need to ask for. So if you own a business and you're not necessarily an IT business owner, but you do know you need someone to manage your mail or cloud services, that's what this document helps you with.
That's great.
Let me add, Brian, that it provides definitions for those positions in terms of skill sets that are required to perform the jobs that are described. So it'll describe a particular job, and then it'll describe a set of skills that are needed, and that will help you develop your talent recruiting materials, so that people looking for jobs can find jobs that match their skill sets, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I know from Karen's point, training is a big challenge too, because you mentioned the skills gap. There is a huge gap, and when managed service providers and those in the IT space are looking to, expand their team, a lot of times they're just too expensive to bring some of the experts on, so they're training within. So having a training, something that can help them build their training roadmap for their existing staff is a phenomenal resource to have. So that's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And also, the product that we actually produce here at the NCCOE, our practice guides, we do that mapping for the reader. So you don't have to have, a plethora of all these documents to try and find out, how do I train them? What's the best practice? We do that for you. We do that alignment in the practice guide.
That's great. Fantastic. So what changes in the current cybersecurity standards, going back to NIST, should we expect in the coming years? I know we see things like, everybody thinks of the network traditionally as, the computers and the devices hooked in it, but now we've got AI, we've got drones and so many new technologies coming in. Do you see it embracing more of kind of where we're going in the technology space?
That's a great question, and it's so hard to thread that needle when you have a standard when you have a standards body. You know the standard's done when the standard is done. It's very hard to forward look to say, well, what is coming, the next generation technology that we need to prepare for. But NIST has done a really great job at this, and I would tend to say that there will be updates, as always, to standards that align with the technology changes and how those technologies change and what threats are evolving and what is the next large concern, not just in but in an innovative way too. Cryptography, quantum cryptography, artificial intelligence, machine learning, automated machine learning, large-scale data processing. I think it's nothing that NIST would probably produce a new standard. Those are left to the standards organization. But NIST is really looking at updating constantly the standards as they are to align with what is changing. And the life cycle for those has tended to speed up, as you would imagine.
Definitely, certainly, and I know with looking in the framework, some of the things are fairly broad, so a lot of the changes will fit under those. It's just determining which ones make the most sense, especially in the MSP community, because they're looking at helping their clients evolve and build their own technology roadmaps, and how do they incorporate cybersecurity into that space. And many, I think, are very well ahead of the curve, but there's a lot that are looking for some assistance. And how do I make this in a nice, orderly fashion? And how do I be that consultant of providing the right information to my business? It's a lot of them, the vast majority in the channel are the SMB clients that they're supporting.
Right, and it's where do I start? How do I take a bite out of this apple? And what is important to me in my business?
Yep.
Right.
Makes perfect sense. So we talked previously about your congressional initiative about support for the SMB community. Now that I mentioned that part, but what does that involve? What is your team doing to support that community?
That initiative was had requested NIST to provide support to the SMB community to help them improve their cybersecurity postures. And NIST has to date developed some documents, some publications for the small business community. There's also many other federal agencies have published them as well, like the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Small Business Administration, Federal Trade Commission. There's many other areas out there where there are free resources to help you understand cybersecurity and make cybersecurity decisions. What we are doing here at the NCCOE is we're really in our research phase. We want to hear from the SMB and the MSP community. What are the technical concerns, tough technical issues that they face, problems is there that we can help solve here at the center. So we have significant amount of cybersecurity expertise here. We can solve these problems, but we want to understand what the problems are from the MSP and SMB community. We don't want to pretend like we know what their problems are. So that's where our involvement comes in. And this conversation here and other conversations that we've been having is trying to ask for suggestions and comments about the problems that they face securing those SMB customers that the MSPs have. If they can help us define a few problems, we would be very happy to look at those. We'd also like to have feedback on the publications that we've already created at nccoe.nist.gov. If you believe, or if the MSP community believes that a different form if a publication would be more useful, we'd like to hear that too. That's another solution area that we're interested in.
Now, did you say the best way for them to engage and give you that feedback is through the website? Eric?
Yeah, so at NCCOE.NIST.gov, at the bottom of the page, there's a Contact Us link. And on that contact page is a web form where they can send us whatever comments, questions. They can ask for direct connections. Believe it or not, we're happy to talk individually to MSPs to understand better the concerns that they have. Of course, we want to work on issues that are generic, so to speak, or broad issues that a lot of MSPs face. But we certainly need to talk to individual ones to understand the details. So NCCOE.NIST.gov, the Contact Us link at the bottom will take you to a web form that will allow you to send us your info or send us your comments and questions. And we look forward to those to that coming in.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what evolves from this initiative that you have too. I think in the SMB community, nobody knows it better, in my perspective, especially on cybersecurity, than MSPs. So I'm hoping that you get a lot of feedback from them as far as the issues they run into supporting clients, and that you can help them kind of work through some of those points too. I think it's an excellent resource, not to overuse the word we've talked about before. But if you're engaging with them and having those discussions, I think that, for example, at the IoTSSA events, we go through a lot of these type of discussions. Is what's the biggest challenge that they're facing supporting and protecting their SMB clients? Because honestly, people always become the biggest part. Is if we could just take people out of the equation, it'd be great, but that doesn't work.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to focus on technology. We're not allowed to focus. No, we can't fix the people problem here.
Yeah. Well, we keep working on that part, but inevitably, I think there'll be a lot of jobs available because you'll never fix that part. But yeah, putting the layered security in place to help protect when people fail, I think is the ultimate goal for most MSPs right now, and educating as much as they can. So in addition to government, I know the NCCOE works with industry and academia, and offers a literal treasure trove of resources for various communities, including the practice guides. I think you mentioned those earlier. What's the intent of this program, and who can benefit from the information in these documents?
Sure. The intent of the documents, the program and the documents, is to improve the cybersecurity of the nation's economic engines, which is our commercial industries across the board. And we know that the vast majority of those organizations out there are considered small to medium-sized business, so which is why we have a very strong interest in helping. The practice guides that we are publishing, again, freely published and available at NCCOE.NIST.gov, include quite a bit of information on particular cybersecurity issue. So for this, I will pick on IT asset management. Every organization has that problem, and I'm sure MSPs themselves have that problem. And we created a practice guide. It was at the request of the finance sector, although the solution is certainly not specific to the finance sector, where we describe at a high level in business terms what the issue is that we understood that they face, and that there is a solution. And then in a more technical level, we describe or design a reference architecture that describes all the capabilities, all the functions, all the things you need to do to perform asset management in an organization. And that architecture is vendor agnostic. What that means is if you probably have a few of those products, you probably have a few products already up in your environment that are doing some pieces of that reference architecture, and we're showing you what all the pieces are, the whole full scope. And by comparing that to what you do today, you can find some other functions and capabilities that you should put in place to complete to in a cost-effective way, of course, the IT asset management implementation for your organization. We also provide a theory of operation that describes why that works and how that reference architecture works, how the systems are connected, and the data that they share. We also provide a mapping in there to that cybersecurity framework, which we mentioned earlier, which is the cybersecurity framework is a way to describe what your cybersecurity program looks like, all the functions that you have in place and the processes you have in place that protect your environment. The last part of that guide is what we call a how-to guide. I consider the whole thing a how-to guide, but the last part is the step-by-step instructions describing how we built a proof of concept in our lab with products that are off the shelf and that were volunteered by those vendors, and in some cases they were open source products. So that by creating this proof of concept, we believe we're proving that reference architecture is practical and can be implemented today with today's technology. So that's what we're trying to do here. Karen, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do want to add one thing. So if I were an MSP and I left my job tomorrow and became an MSP, here's how I would use the guides. I would read our practice guide, take volume A, and talk to my partner or CFO and say, this is why we need to spend money on this implementation. I would take part B, and educate myself onto how I was going to implement this. And C, I would send the how-to portion to myself and a really strong partner who could plug and play network administration, strong technical background in segmentation, spinning up Active Directories, what have you. But that's for the MSP. I think that the customers of the MSPs would be secure and have a level of comfort and see value in the fact that the MSP providing a service is saying, hey, I've got a NIST practice guide I'm working with. You're covered. I'm mapping it to the best practices, a secure framework, and it's free. So if I were an MSP, I'd take it's like free integration, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It does, and free is always good, especially when it's well validated in an industry supported document.
Yeah,
true.
I think process is the key thing when it comes to managed service providers too. They're looking to be efficient, but most of all, be effective for their clients. So it seems like you could use a guide like this when they're building out a specific practice. So it's a practice guide, obviously, but if they're building their business plan or their model around, I want to roll out asset management.
Exactly.
Financial vertical, this would be something that they would definitely want to research and go through and utilize as a tool. So in addition to the practice guides, what other resources would be of value to the MSPs and other channel professionals that you offer?
So I think I mentioned before the cybersecurity for small business, that publications that NIST has created, and the others that are available from other government agencies. The practice guides are a primary resource that we're offering here at the NCCOE. But again, we are not afraid to talk to any one individual MSP to answer questions about the practice guide, why we made certain decisions, why the architecture looks the way it does, or why we implemented in a particular way. So we are a resource as well, available to talk to them about, to help them understand the value of the approach and potential reuse of the practice guide for discussions with their customers, as Karen was talking about.
Very good. And you may get questions, can you come and help me sell my clients on this new service too? That's probably not so much.
Not so much.
It depends on where we're traveling.
Someplace sunny, probably this time of year would be great.
Yeah. So and we are planning webinars with MSPs for their customers, and that is an option as well. If an MSP has a webinar series that they do for their customers to help educate their customers, we can do that remotely very easily.
Oh, that would be awesome. So that's something that so basically MSP should engage with you and figure out what exactly they can do to help you, but also the opposite of what ways they could utilize the NCCOE within their, especially cybersecurity practice.
Yeah.
Sure. I think we would bring a lot of value.
Any adoption, any use of the practice guide or the resources here that helps make an organization more secure is what we are all about.
Excellent. So you mentioned as well that your team creates projects for various sectors. What's involved in that, and what industries are you focusing on?
Sure. So the practice guides are the result of a project, and we have to date the most active industry sectors have been utilities, electric utility for the most part, healthcare. Most of the work has been around the hospital infrastructure, retail, hospitality, finance have been the primary sectors. We also have some projects that are sector independent. So, for example, we just published a project to help ISPs secure the routing infrastructure within the internet, for example. We also published a practice guide around mobile device security and a practice guide around email security. The email security is something I think all MSPs would be very interested in, because that's a way to prevent their customers' email prevent others from spoofing the domain of their customers' email accounts.
Great. And I know that you are a vendor agnostic, vendor neutral association by your mission, but you also do work with those that volunteer to come and work with you as well. So, if I'm not mistaken, you're not going to pick sides when it comes to what's the best cybersecurity offering, but you're working with vendors in addition to MSPs. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. So I would see those as two different areas. We call them collaborators. So vendors volunteer when we announce a new project, which is another way to say our intention to create a new practice guide. We announce that to the world, and vendors are able to volunteer on a first-come, first-served basis to participate and help us build that proof of concept of the reference architecture that we design as part of the project. Now, if an MSP volunteered, they could potentially be a collaborator as well and help ensure that we design something that's practical, that's using their practical knowledge of their integration examples in the world to help us build the most practical example or proof of concept in the lab here. Does that make sense?
It does. There's a lot of options.
Yeah.
So one last question I have for you today is, so what is the best way, if I'm an MSP, I think you've given a couple examples, but if I'm an MSP and I'm looking at all these vast resources that you have and the things that I can do, what's the best way for me to participate with your group?
So I think we touched on most of them. First, I would say reach out using the web form at the Contact Us link. We are happy to talk to people in one-on-one, but that's the best way to start the conversation and get in contact with us. The second is to watch for opportunities to collaborate, and there's a process there. I think the best for the purposes here, we publicly announce these projects, and we can help people understand how to do that, how to get in contact with us to do that. And then once we do make contact, there's a number of different avenues. There's the collaboration on a new project. There is the idea generation for new projects that are related to MSPs and their small business customers. And so those are the ways that we are very interested to hear, and the MSPs can participate.
And Brian, I'll add too, I believe NIST has a Twitter channel and a YouTube channel as well, constantly updating information on the next workshop, the next collaboration event, the next draft publication, when things are actually going to be published. I will say that we do have a good handle on a line of, like, our pipeline of efforts, but we really look to the community that you serve to talk to us about how to address all the aspects of the cybersecurity challenge, because the diversity is really helpful. It makes a richer practice guide.
Very good. Any final thoughts before we sign off today? It's been a great conversation, but unfortunately our time is running out.
Thank you. This has been lovely. Just nccoe.nist.gov is the last and final hurrah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.
Great.
Very good. Well, thank you for such a great conversation today, and kind of unraveling a little bit, I think, of what's behind NIST and the NCCOE. Sounds like you're doing great work and can do even more work on behalf of the channel and MSPs. So I'm encouraging our audience to reach out and engage through the medium we discussed. But I also want to say we appreciate all who tuned in to listen to our discussion today. I encourage you to take a minute and check out the list of upcoming IoTSSA Cybersecurity Expo one-day events on the association's website. Ours is IoTSSA.com. Our next stop is Salt Lake City, Utah, at the Topgolf Meeting Facility on March 26. It's a free event for MSPs, so be sure to register on our website ASAP to reserve your seat. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a fantastic day.